Let's talk about what happens when leaders avoid decisions. Indecision is a decision. And why does authority erode when leaders stall out? Gosh, I'm ready to jump into this topic today. Welcome back to another episode of Don't Waste the Chaos. I'm excited to be with you today. And I will say before I get started, if you hear anything different in my style of talking, I had a crown placed today and not like the one on my head that belongs there. I had some dental work done. So I've been putting off recording this episode for a few hours now, and I'm still just pretty numb on my tongue and the right side of my mouth. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you're like, oh, her mouth is acting a little bit different. Yeah, I had some dental work done today. And you know what? I'm 43 and I'm not done yet. I've got a little bit of cleanup to do. But here we are. And I also, if you can relate, got my son's consult done for braces today. This is something I didn't think I would do. I never had braces or any of that. And so I said, unless my kid can't chew or something, I'm not going to let him get them. But you know what? We're dealing with a pretty severe overbite and a few different things. So here we go. We're jumping into it. I'm just another parent shelling out thousands of dollars for braces. So a collective moment of silence for my pocketbook. All right, let's jump into the topic at hand. Trust doesn't break loudly, usually. Sometimes it does. We've all made those big mistakes. Sometimes it does. And things get wild, right? And I understand that. But usually it doesn't break loudly. It breaks when leaders go silent. Oh, apathy. I've seen it over and over again. I know that you have too. You probably feel it. So let's just go ahead and name the tension. There's a specific moment when trust starts to crack, and it's rarely when a leader makes the wrong decision. Sometimes it is, but usually it's not. Trust breaks when leaders don't make any decision at all. And gosh dang, I see this all of the time. When something clearly needs to be addressed, like a role misalignment or a behavior problem or a process that no longer works, instead of choosing, the leader hesitates. They delay. They defer. They call for another meeting. They ask for more input, and they wait for clarity that just never arises. And what everyone else experiences in that pause is not neutrality. It's not, oh, I respect this because we just need some more information. The experience is abandonment, because leadership authority isn't just about power. It's about containment. It's about boundaries. It's about being willing to say this stops here or this is where we're going with clarity, even when the decision is uncomfortable. This isn't just a workplace issue either. This shows up in marriages. It shows up in parenting. It shows up in friendships. It shows up in faith communities. Anywhere where people are relying on someone else to hold a line. Indecision erodes trust faster than almost anything else. And what makes this particularly dangerous is that most leaders don't feel like they are breaking trust. They feel like they're being careful. Maybe they're being kind, like they're being thoughtful, maybe like they're being inclusive, maybe they're being patient. But from the other side of the equation, it feels like uncertainty, it feels like inconsistency, and it can feel like a lack of protection. Trust doesn't break when leaders choose wrong. It breaks when leaders refuse to choose at all. And I have seen this in so many organizations. And in a lot of cases, we think it's for a good reason. We think, it might even come initially out of a posture of humility. We don't know it all as the leader. And so we're trying to weigh in the thoughts of others, and that's important. But once we've weighed in and got the thoughts of others, I'm not saying don't. I'm saying do it. But once you collect that information, you have to move. Sometimes you're making a decision that's not fully baked. Actually, most times, most all the time, in business, in parenting, in our relationships, we are just doing the best that we can with what we have. And I'm not saying move prematurely. I'm saying once you've collected some information, you've got to make a decision. Indecision is not neutral. It is a signal. One of the biggest leadership myths is that delaying a decision keeps the peace. That's wild, but that is what I hear from clients. I've heard from past colleagues is we just don't want to rock the boat. And in reality, indecision sends a very loud message. I'm unwilling to use my authority here. And you might think when you hear that, if you're in a leadership position, well, that's a good thing, that I don't want to flex. but you're in a position of authority. You've got people relying on you. So you saying, I'm not going to use my authority just causes them to be like, I could do this better. Or you're weak. Or if I have a problem, I'm not going to come to you because you're not going to solve it. So we might think that we're being kind, gracious, patient, whatever it is, but you're unwilling to use your authority. Why not? And people are always watching where leaders are willing and unwilling to lead, where they're unwilling to stand, where they're unwilling to make a call. That's why trust, authority, and boundaries, this like trifecta, these are inseparable. Let's say trust and authority and boundaries. If you're watching me, it's like in the shape of a triangle. Boundaries require decisions. Authority requires clarity, and trust forms when people believe you will act when action is required, which is pretty much daily as a leader. This is supported by what we see in organizational research. Gallup's engagement data consistently shows that role, clarity, accountability, and confidence in leadership decisions are core drivers of trust and in employee engagement. Edelman's trust barometer reinforces this as well. I was reading the other day, it says employees don't trust leaders who appear evasive or unwilling to make hard calls, even when those calls are unpopular. Employees don't trust leaders who appear unwilling to make hard calls. So if you're a leader and you're holding yourself back in the name of rubbing people the wrong way, just know Edelman's trust barometer says employees don't trust leaders who won't make hard calls. You can make the hard call, even if it's an unpopular decision. Just make sure that you're intentional with it and that you're communicating clearly. People don't need perfection. They need decisiveness anchored in integrity. Scripture doesn't treat indecision lightly either. If you're a Bible person like me, Scripture actually speaks very directly to this pattern. I was reading in James 1:8, it says, a double-minded person is unstable in all their ways. That instability isn't about moral failure necessarily. It's about lack of resolve. When leaders vacillate, people feel unsafe. When authority is wavering, anxiety is rising. Jesus himself modeled decisive leadership, not harshness, not impulsivity, but clarity. He didn't crowdsource his convictions. He didn't wait for consensus when truth required action. And boundaries were never unloving. They're never unloving. They were protective with Jesus, and they are, or at least should be, with us too, if we've got our pure intentions. Avoiding decisions is not humility, it's abdication. And people pay the price for it in a lot of different ways. Let's talk about where this shows up in real organizations. I've seen this pattern repeat across industries. And I'll say, like, right now, let me just think right now, just to give you an idea of what I'm working with. I'm just going to pull up my client list. I'm working with a construction company, like a home builder. I'm working with a counseling organization. I'm working with a mortgage company. I'm working with a school district. I'm working with a distribution and warehouse group. I'm working with a holding company. I'm working with an insurance agency. I'm working with a funeral home company, a florist, a coffee shop, a lumber company, a religious organization. And those are just my bigger clients. Those aren't my like individual private clients that I'm working with. So I'm telling you that to show across industries. When I say across industries, this is a diverse group that I'm working with. And then also drawing upon my personal experience when I was employed, when I was W-2 at organizations. At a mortgage company I worked with, leaders were technically making decisions, but they were always the easiest ones. I felt like promoting someone who wasn't qualified because it avoided discomfort. There was a lot of nepotism in friendships, I guess I would say, or hiring so-and-so's wife or whatever. And that can be beautiful. I'm not saying don't work with your friends, because it is a gift to get to work with your friends, to do the stuff that like has purpose in your life and then bring people that you care about into that. But we've got to have clear expectations and clear boundaries, and talk about wrecking friendships if you don't. And then just putting people in those positions because they're your friends, then you're eroding trust across your entire organization. What about leaving someone in a role long after it's clear they're not performing? I've seen that a number of times. Everybody can see it's not working, but I think senior leaders are afraid that, maybe the team will be dysregulated. The team's already talking about you all behind your back because the leader's weak and they know it and you're not doing anything about it. Choices like these They keep leaders comfortable in the short term, and quietly they destroy trust over the long term. At a university system I was working at, decision avoidance hid behind consensus, a consensus-driven approach. Everything required buy-in from everyone, which meant nothing actually ever moved. Consensus became this like shield, but it was not a true strategy. And people learned quickly that progress was not rewarded. Patience was. And in that organization, I just learned to ask for forgiveness later. I just kept rolling with it. And it was such a rare occasion where people were actually mad at that. I was actually getting things done, but otherwise I was going to have to quit. And I only stayed at that organization for 18 months. And you might think like, geez, Louise, you just jumped around, but I couldn't. It was rotting my guts out. I wanted to get things done and I couldn't get work done. I would do something, I would vet it appropriately, but I wouldn't like wait the 3 to 6 months. It was wild. I'll just give you an example. I came into this organization in the spring of 2016. But the fall of 2015, some real wild things happened in this organization. And I won't share. It was all over the news. It was a university system, but their flagship campus had some major problems. And so they started talking to me toward the end of that year. And by the next spring, I decided to come on board. It took me a while to decide because I had never stayed at home with my son and I wanted to stay at home with him before kindergarten. So I had left my last place of employment, but this organization needed some help with their culture. So they brought me on as the HR director, and I was responsible for all of talent, meaning training and development, performance management, internal communications, things like that. It was a really cool role. Like on paper, a really cool role. Financially, a good role. It was a step up from where I'd been before, and where I was at before was no slouch. So I was really, really excited. Well, when I got inside, I realized that the role was really like a mediator in between these 4 universities, and then also kind of talking to this healthcare facility, but like my ability to actually use my skills, experience, knowledge, education, learnings, or that of those around me was almost just completely wiped off the table because I had to ask other people who'd never had the experience that I had if they were okay with it at their organization. And I'm not saying that they couldn't make a good call for their organization, but there was so much politicking and posturing. It had to be so-and-so's decision. There was the pre-meeting, there was the meeting, there was the post-meeting, there was the follow-up, there was the schmoozing, there was all of that stuff. And we couldn't just make decisions based on the appropriate impact to the employee population. It blew my mind. Consensus became a shield for everything. And really, when I came on board, I said it was the spring of 2016. The fall of 2015 had been hard. Everyone was still just sitting around talking about that. I am not over-exaggerating when I say that. The HR department explicitly was like just stuck in this place where everything was about what had happened and how hard that was and the implications on the employee population, but nobody was like putting plans in place and making change to move forward. So we were just like staying stuck. I couldn't do it. When I got in there, I was like, all right, we're going to have to do some things. But it was like rewarded in that organization, and expect that you just absolutely pined over everything and talked about it again and made sure you talked about it with these 18 people and then over here, these 12 people, and then one-on-ones with all of those individuals. And then don't forget cross-departmental conversation. It was wild to me. We couldn't get anything done. And you know what? Maybe that is the organization that you find yourself in. And you just have to ask yourself, is that okay with you? For some people it is. For some people it is, and thank goodness, because otherwise nobody would work there. But for a person like me, I can't. And if it's eating your lunch or rotting your guts out that you can't move forward or make a decision, you need to move. That's on you. You need to figure out where you belong. At an insurance agency I was at, senior leaders avoided conflict entirely. Poor behavior was tolerated. Strong performers watched it happen. Leaders were frustrated, but they were unwilling to confront the issues, and the culture absorbed the message. Accountability is optional here. And so it caused havoc. We would go to roll out a new technology. People just wouldn't use it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're actually going to use that. But when I would go to exert my authority, then it would be circumvented by other senior leaders. Oh, Kerri's on a power trip. Kerri is not on a power trip. We spent $100,000 on this platform, and by golly, we're going to use it. And we pitched all the reasons why. We moved forward. We made the purchase. Now we're going to use it. And we're going to have accountability around using it. And I don't care if you've been here for 38 years, if you're not going to use it, you're going to move on out. But first thing I'm going to do is ask you why. And I'm going to make sure you have all the training and the skills that you need. I even pulled clients off of these people to give them the space to learn. And that ticked them off. Like, just wild. Just absolutely wild. When leaders avoid hard conversations, culture fills the vacuum, and it rarely fills it kindly. The same patterns show up in clients today. I see this very regularly. One organization has two people carrying senior leader titles, but those people have no real authority. And I'm not saying they're not given authority. I'm saying they're not using authority. They're not really worthy of the authority. Expectations are unclear. Accountability is soft. Everyone knows that the titles don't really match the reality, including the people that are holding them, which is impacting self-trust, which is perpetuating the issue. That's a major imposter syndrome going on. But the leader, the owner of the company, hasn't made the call to realign or rename because that person's afraid that, because it would be a downshift in title appropriately, or we'd ask these people to step up to the challenge, but they'd need some skills and some training, maybe certifications. So just confusion persists. Another client I have is stuck with an outdated payroll provider. Manual processes, no usable reporting, no automation. Everyone's frustrated, but because they've always done it this way, and because they're friends, the owner is friends with this guy, they don't feel confident in making a switch. Nobody internally knows how to do what this guy is doing. So if they upset him, what happens? Which you just got to bite the bullet. Modernization keeps getting postponed, which is going to it is impacting negatively retention, recruitment. Every delay communicates the same thing. We will tolerate friction rather than risk change. That's not a strategic caution. That's fear wearing professionalism. So here's what leaders must confront. Here's the reframe that leaders need. Avoiding decisions doesn't preserve trust. It erodes it quietly. People trust leaders who are willing to name reality instead of softening it or sugarcoating it. They trust leaders who are holding boundaries instead of hoping behavior changes. And they trust leaders who are making imperfect decisions instead of perfect delays. This applies everywhere. In parenting, inconsistent boundaries confuse children and create anxiety. And here's an example. I've got my own personal example of an area where I'm not doing great at. So I follow the wait till 8th movement. And my son has a Bark phone. And if you're interested, which I do highly recommend Bark, I've got a code to get you some money off if you want to buy one for your kid. But essentially, I bought a Bark phone, and my kid knows nobody else in his 8th grade class that has a Bark phone. Everyone's got an iPhone or a regular Samsung, which blows my mind, by the way. If you're a parent and you're listening to this, like, your kid is 100% looking at penises and vaginas and boobs all the time. Like, it's wild out there. My son is turning 14 this week, and the amount of pedophilia that I see directed toward him blows my mind. He can't see it because everything's blocked, but I can see what's coming through, and it's terrifying. I'm talking about grown men sending videos of themselves masturbating to my child. Ugh, I digress. I should do a whole episode on that. Just the ignorance that parents have, not realizing what's going on out there or choosing to ignore it. So we followed the wait till 8th. So we don't give our son a phone, and it's a highly regulated phone, until 8th grade, which just started in August for him. It's January when I'm recording this episode. So we give it to him, and we write a contract and say that he won't let any grades, I don't mean assignments, but term grades, fall below a B, or he'll have his phone restricted because he needs his focus being placed on his education, his academics. Well, he really struggles in algebra. And so I have given his phone back. It's not even given. I don't take the phone away. I just shut down the controls from the app on my phone. But I'll give it back to him sometimes. He is a creative genius on social media. He has like 30,000 followers on Instagram. He's got a YouTube channel. He's an extremely creative kid, and I love watching it. So what I do is I give and I take away. I give, and then I'm like, oh, his grades are bad, and I take back away. Those inconsistent boundaries are creating all kinds of anxiety with my kid. And then he's frustrated with me, and I'm acting like a tiny dictator or a large dictator, when really I just need to honor the boundaries that we all agreed to from the very beginning. And if you're not recognizing this translates into our workplace, where we're like, I'm going to hold you accountable to these results. And then we're like, oh, you didn't hit those results, but here's the 3 areas where it was a moving target. So we'll try again next quarter. Okay, next quarter, you don't hit the results, but I want to put you on an EPIP, but I didn't hold you accountable last quarter. So now this quarter, I don't feel comfortable doing that. rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. In personal relationships, unspoken expectations breed resentment. So we've got expectations on how people communicate with us, treat us, what have you, and we don't get what we want. And then we're resentful, but we're not communicating. Or if we are communicating, we're not holding people accountable or being honest. In organizations, unmade decisions become cultural norms. Authority isn't about control. It's about responsibility. And this is where strong advisory support really matters. Leaders often know what needs to be done, but they also need a trusted authority partner to help them think through the implications, the risk, and the organizational ripple effects. And what I see my clients do is they want to, like, I've got one client who he's brilliant, but as soon as someone starts pushing up against him, he softens because he doesn't have that like foundation of knowing, let's say, the HR law or what the ripple effect could be. So then when I'm like, hey, you need to tell them no, and they actually need to understand how good they've got it, he's like, yeah, they do. And then he firms back up. Then he gets more firm in his decision making. And I'm like, yeah, he just needed me to remind him that it's okay to be the leader. And leaders, especially business owners, but all of us as leaders or parents or single parents or whatever, we need permission sometimes, right? We're holding the bag, but we need permission to be firm. That's the lane that I work in. It's advisory, not execution. It's authority. It's not templates. I help leaders decide what they're avoiding and what it's costing them. And then I'm right there next to them when they're stepping through it. This is also why I'm expanding my work in 2026. I'm moving into a season of hosting some retreats. I've had a ton of people ask, like, can we get together and go through this? And I've done it with a few different clients, flown to them and helped them out. And so I've decided to create 2 different lanes for retreats this year. I'm so excited to announce them to you. Haven't really put a ton out about them yet, so you're going to hear it pretty much first unless you're in my email list. So one is for HR leaders, navigating authority, influence, and trust at the organizational level, really building out that core HR foundation, doing a few different things. I can do standalone retreats, but my favorite thing that I've put together is this foundational program. And essentially, it's the first quarter we get together, we do an HR audit. The second quarter, we're jumping into the compliance aspect of your business. The third quarter, we're jumping into the people management aspect. And then the fourth quarter, we're jumping into benefits and engagement and culture. And so by the end of a year of doing this, it's intensive. We get together for a day and a half, just once a quarter. So you're still able to fully run your business. I'm not meddling in your stuff, but we're really getting together and doing concentrated work. If you want me to stick around and do accountability calls outside of that, we can upgrade you. But otherwise, we get together, we focus on this for a day and a half. You go back to work. A couple months later, we get together, we have the building blocks. And at the end of the year, your organization is going to be in a much, much stronger shape. The other retreat lane is for women working on self-trust, because decision avoidance often starts internally before it shows up externally. And why would you want to work on self-trust? Most people are like, I do trust myself. Well, do you get up when your alarm clock goes off first thing in the morning? If you say you're going to drink a liter of water every day, how are you doing on that? If you say you're going to lift weights 3 to 5 times a week, how's it working when you do it for 2? When you say you're going to have more patience with your kid, but you just absolutely popped off in the car on the way to school, then you don't have good trust in yourself. And so I work through with women how to build trust in themselves. I also do this for organizations too. I just did this for a healthcare facility a couple months ago. So I love that. Both spaces are about clarity, conviction, and reclaiming authority, both personally and professionally. So if you want to know more about retreats, you can go to saltlightadvisors.com and there's plenty of information in there about it, or you can always shoot me a message. So one of the reasons leaders avoid decisions is uncertainty about responsibility. What are they actually responsible for? Right now with one of my clients, I was like, hey, we need job descriptions, or I'm going to do a compensation data study. Send me the job descriptions for every position so I can make sure I'm benchmarking to the right role. And I learned they didn't have any job descriptions. So I was like, well, let's start out with the executive team. Do you guys have a list of your KPIs, rocks, goals? No. They didn't. And you know what? I'm not shaming them. I was so excited to be like, oh, you guys are going to love this. I know right now you're like, blah, the HR girl is hitting us up for stuff that we don't have. This is going to feel so good. It's going to feel so good for each of you to have clarity on your roles. Therefore, then we'll figure out clarity on goals. And then we'll have clarity on your employees' roles and cascading goals. It's going to feel so freaking good. And you can't go without that. You can't go without that for another day. I'm telling you right now, if you're listening to this episode and you all don't have clear job descriptions and clear KPIs or goals for every single role, call me. Shoot me a message. Let's get that cleaned up for your organization. We can get this clean, we can get this cleaned right up, and it's going to feel so good. I also created a free resource for you. It's called the Employer Responsibility Checklist. It's a practical clarity tool to help leaders understand where accountability truly sits with them, what a business is truly responsible for, and essentially what a judge is going to say. Yeah, you can't say you didn't know. So you can download that at saltandlightadvisors.com/employer responsibility checklist, all one word. It's not a framework. It's a mirror for you. And as a side note, I also pay close attention to decision fatigue and stress signals in my own leadership. And that's why I use my Aura ring. When leaders are depleted, decision avoidance increases. You're fatigued. Data doesn't replace judgment, but it can protect it. So if you want a code to my Aura ring, I will leave that in the show notes as well. And I'll place a link to the employer responsibility checklist in the show notes as well. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Where in your life or where in your leadership or both are you postponing a decision that others are already paying for? Trust isn't rebuilt with explanations. It's rebuilt with clarity. If this episode resonated, I invite you to keep listening on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you're a leader looking for advisory support, executive speaking, or retreat-based work based around trust and authority, that's exactly what I do. Because leadership doesn't require certainty. It requires the courage to decide. And trust follows leaders who are willing to stand. I know that some of this can feel like chaos. It can feel hard to make the hard decisions, but the work is worth it. So don't waste the chaos. Embrace it. Until next time.